Okay, so I'll start. Good morning and welcome to this webinar on the European Commission's Circular Economy Action Plan. My name is Sarah Miller and I am the Chief Executive of the Rediscovery Centre, which is the National Centre for the Circular Economy here in Ireland. My role today is as co-host and facilitator, so I just want to run through the running order with you and just some of the practical considerations for the webinar. So we're going to begin today with an introduction from Mary Frances Rochford. Mary Frances is Programme Manager with the Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Action and Circular Economy Programme. Mary Frances will be followed by Laura Neeson, Research and Policy Officer here at the Rediscovery Centre, who's going to take us through the key actions of the Circular Economy Action Plan. And after that informational session, we're going to hand over to our guest experts, who will begin with a brief summary of their work in the circular economy and also their thoughts on the Circular Economy Action Plan. So we are delighted to be joined by Philip Nugent, Assistant Secretary in the Department of Communications, Climate Action and the Environment, by Ladea Godina Koshir, founder of Circular Change, and by Cillian Lohan, member of the European Economic and Social Committee. He's also the CEO of the Green Economy Foundation. If you want any more information on our guest speakers, we have biographies included in the link that you would have received for the Zoom information on this call. So firstly, we've got a full house today. We have 100 people registered for the call, and we have another 70 following us on a live stream from YouTube. The event is being recorded and microphones will stay off until we invite you to ask a question. After all the introductions and the initial reviews of the Circular Economy Action Plan, we're going to open up the floor to you and take questions. So please, if you do wish to ask a question, use the chat function to let us know, or you can raise your hand as well. We're delighted that so many of you have actually joined us here today, and we do hope to make it as interactive as possible, given that we do have a lot of people on the call. So I'm going to immediately hand over to Mary Frances to introduce the webinar.
Great. Thank you very much to Sarah, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar, Going Forward from the EU Circular Economy Action Plan. I'd like to thank the Rediscovery Centre working with us in partnership through the National Waste Prevention Programme for today's event. So this programme and this webinar brings really everyone together to build on the Rediscovery Centre's very successful webinar last summer, which focused on circular economy action plans that were being developed and implemented in Europe and beyond. And, you know, as we all know, in March, the Commission published the latest Circular Economy Action Plan. And the purpose of today's webinar is to give an overview of that and to have a real meaningful and hopefully a lively conversation in relation to the opportunities and the challenges that are presented for Ireland. This image will be very familiar to all of you, and depending on your various roles, you'll have involvement and the ability to influence at one or several points throughout this schematic, be it within design, production and remanufacturing, through to distribution, consumption use, collection of waste and recycling. And of course, we all have a role in relation to our role as a consumer in relation to how we manage, how we use, and how we dispose of products and services. The ambition of the circular economy is for a cleaner and more competitive Europe. And there are opportunities indeed for a cleaner and more competitive Irish economy if we set ourselves up in terms of how we manage our policy, legislation and supporting initiatives. Ireland's National Waste Prevention Programme is led and managed by the Environmental Protection Agency, funded through the Department of the Environment, and it sits within the EPA's Climate Change and Circular Economy Programme. The NWPP's mission and vision is to prevent waste and to drive a circular economy in Ireland. And one of the key challenges that Ireland faces is its use of and consumption of over 100 million tonnes of material annually, which puts Ireland into the higher bracket in terms of its consumption rates across European member states. The circular economy is the next industrial revolution, and most importantly for us, it's already here, and it will define the future of commercial activity in Ireland and across the world. It is a very conscious realignment of the business models that are in place to maximise the value and the use of our resources. And it is driven very much by the need for us and the want and desire for us to maintain the standard of living in the context of immediate pressures such as climate impacts and resource availability. So the National Waste Prevention Programme through the national aims to facilitate this through national level strategic programmes, delivering through partnerships, supporting innovation and demonstration, and advocating and communicating through the delivery of evidence to inform change. Through our work with IBEC, we have identified another significant change for the Irish economy and how we move towards a circular economy. And that is in terms of business awareness and business level of engagement in relation to the circular economy and the opportunities that it presents. The IBEC publication is Irish Business Getting Ready for the Circular Economy, which was published in 2019, saw that, and based on a jointly funded survey of over 200 Irish chief executives, found that only just over 50% understood what is meant by the circular economy. And in terms of the EU initiatives that are there to drive and sustain the circular economy, again, we found that there was a relatively low understanding among chief executives of what that would mean. We did see, though, that there is a desire and an acknowledgement to move towards the circular economy and a recognition of the business opportunities that are there in the long term. However, 1 in 10 companies had a specific budget in place to support circular economy initiatives, while almost 40% said that funding availability would be a major challenge. And this is important for all of us on the call to recognise and to take on board as we listen to Laura's presentation in a while, in terms of how we take that next step in terms of implementing the circular economy at the various stages through the diagram that I referred to earlier. We do see that there are supports out there, and if I can take the opportunity to flag an upcoming support which will be launched later in the month, which through the National Waste Prevention Programme, and that's our Green Enterprise Innovation for Circular Economy funding call. And that's an annual funding call. It's specific to innovating in the circular economy. And it's been running for a number of years, and the 2020 call, as I said, will launch later this month and will present an opportunity for successful applicants to get up to €100,000 funding per successful application for applied research to stimulate innovation in priority areas through that the NWPP has identified. So these areas include food, plastics, construction and demolition waste, construction and demolition, electrical and electronic equipment, and furniture and textiles. So I'd ask you all to look out for that over the coming weeks. We very much work in a partnership, take a partnership approach through the National Waste Prevention Programme, and it is through that partnership that today's event is hosted and how we work with the Rediscovery Centre. And you'll see Sarah and our Director General launching that initiative last year. As we work towards and move into today's seminar, it will very much give us the opportunity to hear the overview of the Circular Economy Action Plan and to engage with experts and yourselves. So we would very much take the opportunity to encourage you yet again to engage in that dialogue. We do need to remember that the circular economy is wider than waste prevention and increasing recycling. It encompasses eco-design, eco-labelling, clean production, supporting reuse and repair. And the circular economy can support Ireland's economic recovery, and we all have an important part to play. Just to draw your attention to 3 of the key sectors, if we look in terms of government and the public sector, the opportunities there in terms of policy development and leadership through action, and particularly the opportunities that are presented through green public procurement. In terms of business, as I mentioned earlier, a high level of engagement and awareness and looking out for the opportunities to embrace the concept and to move to new business models. but also in terms of new products and services that are there and how we can incentivize innovation and demonstrate and stimulate this change in approach. And finally, for the public and all of us as individuals, in terms of how we look at creating a circular demand and move towards a more responsible consumption of materials. I look forward to a very interesting session from Sarah and Laura, and I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise during the day. So I'll now hand over to Laura.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a background to the Circular Economy Action Plan, just so everyone knows what we're talking about and what we're discussing today. And the Circular Economy Action Plan that the Commission put out in March this year isn't the first time the European Commission has worked on circular economy. There's been previous work on the circular economy in 2015 and 2018, including work on updating the Waste Framework Directive, but also on a strategy for plastics and similar. And this specific time, the Circular Economy Action Plan is part of a much broader program, the European Green Deal, which the von der Leyen Commission proposed when they took office in late 2019. And the European Green Deal, as it says there on the graphic, is about transforming the entire European economy for a sustainable future. And the Circular Economy Action Plan is very much a cornerstone of that, ensuring that there's a competitive but also sustainable, socially and environmentally sustainable future within the planetary boundaries for the European Union. Just to mention, the action plan is not a legally binding document. It's more of a roadmap that the Commission puts out, pointing out the legislation that it would like to propose in the next few years. And specifically, most of the legislation that is in there is actually for the next 2 years, so 2020 to 2022, which is quite a tight time frame. Broadly, there's 7 themes to the action plan, and I'd like to just go through all of them very briefly to give you an idea of what it covers and the large amount of things it covers. And there's 4 that are more sectoral, while there's 3 that are more overarching or more cross-cutting. The first one is the Sustainable Product Policy Framework, and that very much looks into sustainable design and sustainability principles for products as well as services. And sustainable design is so important, as we can see, because up to 80% of an item's impact is determined in the design phase. So if we are able in the design phase to ensure reusability, repairability, recyclability, or even a low water and energy use in an item, it makes it a lot more sustainable during its production and use time. The Sustainable Product Policy also ensures that, or suggests that single-use plastics will be curbed, as well as planned obsolescence, so when items stop working after a certain amount of time. This Sustainable Product Policy and the principles around reusing, repairing, low environmental footprint are first prioritized for 5 key sectors, which you can see on the left here, and that's the electronics and ICT sector, textiles, furniture, and high-impact intermediate products, and these would be the likes of cement, steel, or chemicals. Then it's also important to note that this Sustainable Product Policy looks into the entire value chain. It looks into design, but it also wants sustainability principles in the value chain, which includes promoting new innovative business models, circular business models. The right to repair and the empowerment of consumers are a next step. So empowering consumers looks into ensuring that people, when they buy an item at point of sale, have the information, for instance, how long their product is expected to last, how they can repair it, but they are also protected from any kind of greenwashing practices. So they don't have to fall prey to any of these. The right to repair is related. It enshrines the right for consumers to have their items repaired, the right to access to manuals and to spare parts, and similarly for any kind of digital devices, the right to update as well. Substantiating green claims then looks into consumer protections from the business side of view. So it looks into ensuring that any businesses that claim they have any green credentials actually have to verify these, for instance, through environmental footprinting. And green public procurement is another large part of this first theme, the Sustainable Product Policy Framework. As we can see here in the picture, the public authorities in the European Union represent 14% of the EU's GDP. Their purchasing power represents 14%, which is a large force for the circular transition if it can be leveraged towards this point. That is why the action plan suggests both mandatory green public procurement targets, but also mandatory reporting on how green public procurement is being done across the European Union. Then there's also, in this first theme, a part of creating a circular production process. And that is looking into making things leaner, cleaner, more circular, enabling industrial symbiosis, for instance, through reporting or certification system, and reviewing the Industrial Emissions Directive to ensure that the circular economy plays a part in that too. The Bioeconomy Action Plan, which is mentioned here, is already existing, and it needs to be implemented. The plan points out it needs to be implemented and very closely linked to the circular economy, as those two different concepts are quite similar or quite linked anyway. And all of that is very much in the current context of digitalization. So using digital tools to track and measure and map where resources are in Europe so that they can be reused and repaired and recycled. Our second theme of the plan are the key product value chains. So they would be product groups that have specific actions attached to them. And I'm just going to very briefly go over each of them, putting out some of the examples of actions, but not all. There's more in the plan if you find time to read it. So for all of these, obviously, the first theme of sustainable product design and sustainability principles applies as well. For circular electronics, for instance, it's very much about looking into recycled content, but also, for instance, the suggestion of a common charger solution across the European Union so that all mobile phones have the same charger. And that linked to a take-back scheme where people can bring back their old mobile phones, their old chargers and tablets, and be rewarded for it to ensure that these materials in the items are retained. For batteries, it would be about recycled content, improving collection and recycling of batteries, and slowly phasing out batteries that are non-rechargeable as well. For end-of-life vehicles, it's about linking the design of new vehicles with old vehicles. So again, making sure that recycled content from an old vehicle enters into the production of a new one. And for packaging, it's very much based on current work on packaging and packaging waste, reviewing the directive that is out there, but also reducing over packaging and ensuring that reuse is prioritized over single use, and that if possible, if it's economically feasible, reusable packaging will be favored. And that is also linked to reducing material complexity. So the plan points out the need to have fewer different materials, fewer polymers mixed together in packaging in order to ensure that it's recyclable after the end of use. The plastics product group is actually based on the existing European strategy for plastics in the circular economy, and goes a bit further, maybe by pointing out the need for recycled content requirements in packaging, end-of-life vehicles and construction. And it also looks into microplastics. So intentionally added microplastics, for instance, in cosmetics, will be restricted. Unintentionally added microplastics or unintentionally released microplastics will be better caught, better eliminated. And also, the plan also points out there's a need to look into the impacts that microplastics have on our health and our environment. And the third part to the plastics group is the distinction between biodegradable, bio-based, and compostable. And the plan points out there's a need for a framework to properly delineate them to ensure they are used prudently and only applied when they're actually sustainable. The product group of fashion, textiles, is no surprise, as they are the fourth largest consumer of resources globally as an industry. And the strategy for textiles that will be produced through this Circular Economy Action Plan looks into ensuring circular design in textiles, ensuring that items are reusable, repairable, but also that the new business models that come with the circular economy, such as product as a service, renting and sharing, are supported, especially in the textile sector. And the current legislation has a target for 2025 for mandatory separate collection of textiles in all member states. And this upcoming strategy for textiles will provide guidance on how this can actually be achieved. The construction sector will be tackled with a strategy for the built environment, which will look into circular design for buildings, but also the likes of digital logbooks, so where we can find which materials are in a building so that at the end of use, they can actually be deconstructed, taken apart, and then reused or recycled in another building. And the final key product group is food, water, and nutrients. That again very much relates to the bioeconomy strategy, but also to the forthcoming farm to fork strategy, which is expected in May, as far as I'm aware, and which is a strategy on the food system in Europe and where this will go. And I hope we hear a bit more about that maybe in a while. There's also an initiative or a thought in the action plan to maybe look into substituting any single-use items in food service through reuse. The third theme that we have is less waste, more value. And maybe just to mention here that while there's an entire circular economy action plan, only one of the themes specifically relates to waste. The plan rather starts at the design stage, so a lot higher up in the product life. And less waste, more value, as it says, looks into waste reduction, overall reducing waste, but also points to a very specific objective of having all non-recycled municipal waste by 2030, and wants to also connect that with specific waste reduction targets for different streams. A suggestion of the plan is a harmonized waste collection system, so the same separate collection of waste across all of Europe, as well as the same labeling. And the plan points out the need to ensure that there's no substances of concern in any recycled materials and no substances of concern in our waste, which could then lead into recycled materials. So it's very much about tracking these hazardous substances and ensuring they're removed. The end of waste and byproduct criteria might be revised through this plan as well, which could help make recycling and reuse of items easier. And the last point of the waste theme is looking into exports of waste, as a large amount of waste currently is being exported. It points to the need to retain these materials within the EU because they have value and could be used through reuse or through recycling in the EU, but also they do oftentimes cause social or environmental harm if they are sent abroad. So there's a potential of restrictions on exports in the future. The fourth pillar, or the fourth theme, very much looks into the social side of the circular economy. So we know that at the moment, 4 million jobs in the EU are already linked to the circular economy. And we know that there's a lot more that can be expected through a circular transition, but there's the need to ensure that people have the right skills for it, that this circular transition comes together as a social benefit and an environmental benefit. So the plan points to the need to connect this circular transition to the skills agenda, to an action plan for the social economy, so to ensure social inclusion, but also for a cohesion, so a just approach across the entire European Union to ensure that nobody's left behind, none of the regions are left behind, and that everyone equally benefits from the circular transition. The first cross-cutting part is the synergy between the circular economy and climate action. So we know that the circular economy can be a great driver in mitigating climate change. However, the plan points to the need to properly measure that, put it in numbers, and to also include it in countries' plans for their energy and climate plans, so to ensure that it's considered as a force. And it also points to the potential to incentivize carbon removals, for instance, through certification. The second part is the financing of the transition, and that includes implementing the circular economy in state aid for the environment or energy, but also implementing circular economy thinking in businesses. So adding sustainability principles in a business strategy or looking into environmental accounting. And all of that is also very much connected to the need for research, innovation, and digitalization. So the plan points out that the current instruments that are already there for circular innovation, the likes of Horizon 2020, which will become Horizon Europe, LIFE funding, Interreg funding, will continue to promote research and innovation for the circular economy. Obviously, the planetary boundaries are planetary, they're not just for Europe. So if a circular economy is implemented in Europe, it's not enough if the rest of the world doesn't do the same. So the plan very much points to the need for the European Union to lead at a global level, to take others on the journey to a circular economy with us. And that includes looking into a global agreement on plastics or an international agreement on the management of natural resources, but also building an alliance globally for the circular economy. and also wants to mainstream any circular economy objectives in its foreign policy, in its trade agreements, in any of the funding that it provides to other countries. This all has to be measured. So the final overarching part, the seventh theme, is the monitoring of the progress. One side of that is in the European semester, so in the countries report. How do they continue on or progress on the circular transition, but also monitoring the framework with what we have existing and with new indicators that will be developed to consider consumption and material footprints in the European Union. There's a very clear timeline of actions related to when legislation will be proposed. As I said, it's very much based in between 2020 to 2022. However, we are all aware of the current situation. There are certain delays related to COVID-19, so we know that the proposal for empowering consumers in the green transition will be pushed back by 1 year. There might be other impacts on further legislative proposals that has to be seen. Yet we can also see that there's a larger group of people that are now calling for a green recovery from COVID. So to ensure that in the economic recovery from COVID, we take into account the European Green Deal, we take into account the environmental and the social side. And there's a good few ministers that have joined this green recovery, including our Minister Richard Bruton, but also parliamentarians as well as businesses and NGOs. What are the reactions to the plan? They're mixed, as probably one could expect. So the environmental representation usually has said that it's not enough. We live in a planetary emergency. We have overconsumed our resources for a long time, and we actually need to look into reducing consumption rather than maintaining it if we want to be able to live sustainably. But there are also very positive comments, for instance, from business representative bodies such as Business Europe that point, as Mary Frances said as well, to the large opportunity, not just for the environment, but also for business if we implement a circular economy. And it's very interesting to hear what others think, but we actually want to hear what our experts think. So I'm going to hand back to Sarah so we can start with the experts.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Mary Frances. That was very informative, and I hope everyone got to learn some new information about the Circular Economy Action Plan. I know there are a lot of people looking at this plan at the moment, so thank you very much, Laura, for that. So we're now going to turn to our guest speakers. Philip, if I can ask you to unmute your mic, please. As previously mentioned, Philip is the Assistant Secretary with the Department of Communications, Climate Action and the Environment. A number of people on this call today I know are working with Philip on the Waste Action Plan for the circular economy, but today we've asked Philip to summarise his role in circular economy in general, and also to share with us his thoughts on the European Commission's Circular Economy Action Plan. So Philip, over to you.
Thanks, thanks Sarah, thanks Laura. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Just some preliminary thoughts, and as Sarah said, I'll outline my role also. We have an economy and a society that's based around assumptions that we can consume unlimited resources and produce unlimited waste and pollution without consequences, and that has essentially been the economic model that has driven much of the world for the last 2 or 3 centuries, and it's clearly not a sustainable one. We know from the debate around climate change that the survival of the planet is essentially at stake, and that the costs of inaction, it's well established, are far in excess of those of not taking action. And again, as Mary Frances I think mentioned, circular economy goes far beyond just waste. Pretty much all aspects of public policy have a role to play, including transport, forestry, agriculture, water, marine planning, enterprise, energy, land use planning, tourism, rural development, just to name a few. My main focus at the minute is on waste in the circular economy and on developing a new waste policy for a circular economy. And that's still a very broad challenge, I think. Traditionally, waste policy in Ireland and elsewhere has focused on what we do with the stuff that households and businesses throw away. So some of the main challenges considered in this model of waste policy would include things like striking the balance between disposal and recovery, what's the optimal market structure, tackling illegal dumping. Some of these obviously remain central to waste policy and will be for the foreseeable future. And we've seen, for example, in relation to illegal dumping, how that has emerged as a real COVID-19 related issue in recent weeks. but we need to shift the focus from what we do with the stuff that people throw away to look at all stages of the economic cycle and ensure that materials are used as efficiently as possible. So in developing a new waste strategy for Ireland, we're focusing on how we keep resources in use for as long as possible, on extracting the maximum value from them while in use, and then recovering and regenerating products and materials at the end of each service life. So in this context, things like waste prevention take on a much more significant role in overall waste policy, where waste collection and treatment would have dominated previously. We're conscious too that like climate action, the transition to a circular economy requires significant action by every citizen, every business, and every organization. So yes, on the one hand, the circular economy offers a sustainable lifestyle, reduced environmental impact, and lower household bills. And for businesses, potential job creation, very significant job creation of, I think, around 700,000 jobs mooted in the Circular Economy Action Plan. But getting there will require individual and organizational behavioral change. In developing this strategy, we're anxious to get maximum stakeholder engagement and participation, given its importance for every citizen and organization. And so we've placed a strong emphasis on consultation. We had a public consultation on a document running from the end of December until I think the end of February, with around 300 submissions received. And alongside the launch of the consultation process, we've also had a waste action plan advisory group, or a waste advisory group, and a number of the people on the discussion here today will be familiar with that. A number of the members are present on the call today. The intention here is to harness the potential and capacity of the broadest range of stakeholders and sectors, businesses, representatives of the public, environmental and social interests, to guide strategic thinking and decision making in preparation of this new iteration of national waste policy. So we've met 6 times. We've discussed citizen engagement challenge, plastics and packaging policy, deposit and return scheme, market structure, food waste, and waste enforcement. Later today, we meet again to look at construction and demolition, and in 2 weeks' time, our focus is on drawing together the circular economy aspects that we've discussed so far. And I've been very keen to use this group to get across the necessity of this being a shared challenge. It won't work if it's just seen as the government's problem. So we've sought to ensure that we've sought to challenge stakeholders at the group to ask what they can do, or why they haven't already done something, or to challenge producers or retailers, for example, to not just hide behind what I think is a kind of fairly worn out defense of, we're just responding to consumer demand, no matter how unsustainable that demand might be. Those sorts of defenses no longer hold for me. So we've tried to use it as a forum to challenge stakeholders as well. And I think that idea of shared responsibility is very important now, and it'll be just as important whenever this advisory group evolves into an implementation body once the strategy is in place. In terms of the Circular Economy Action Plan, we welcome it, of course. It provides an important context for our work, and it also gives us a mandate, I think, particularly when it comes to the broader cross-government elements of circular economy, because we sometimes face the challenge of emphasizing the positive aspects, or getting traction to the positive aspects of circular economy at a cross-government level. So this gives us a really useful mandate to drive that work forward. We really welcome the focus on product design, on repairability, durability, upgradability, recyclability, and on production processes and byproducts. The issue of consumer behavior and how our stakeholders can positively influence consumption was the first issue we discussed at the Waste Advisory Group, actually, so we really welcome the focus here as well. We remain fully committed to, or in full transposition mode for, the circular economy legislative package, and we'll engage proactively and positively on any new legislative proposals that emerge. And I think, as a small country, we face challenges in tackling some of those things around product design on our own. So we would welcome strong action in the circular economy package in that context. We also are very happy to see the prioritization of plastics and food waste, particularly given the massive impacts on climate. These have been amongst the key issues we've discussed at the Waste Advisory Group. So to a large degree, the work of our group has followed the same key themes that are most prominent in the Circular Economy Action Plan. Our strategy, when it's delivered, and we hope to have it to present to a new minister very shortly after their arrival in office, whenever that will be. But once it's delivered, we'll take the full Circular Economy Action Plan results, the results of the public consultation process, and the discussion of the advisory group into consideration. Laura has mentioned COVID-19 and the context that now creates. So a new waste strategy will also need to take account of that the new context that COVID-19 is creating for all of us. It's obviously been devastating for economies and society around the world, and human and emotional toll is even more severe. But it has shown us that there's an alternative to the way in which many of us live our lives. Our work, our transport, our consumption, and basic social models have been radically altered overnight. And there are some real benefits to this in terms of the environmental impacts: shorter supply chains, local over global, doing more with what we have. With the easing of restrictions, there'll be a temptation to see an adjustment back in the other direction. And all countries are obviously thinking about recovery at this stage, how to get people back to work, how to reopen businesses and get societies back on their feet again. But there's a real opportunity for us to use this really traumatic experience to embed circularity in much more of what we do. To give an example then of some of the specific actions that the strategy might contain, and bear in mind this will be for decision by a new government, so these are just ideas at this stage, but things like targets based around reducing consumption, a commitment to national level decisions on end of waste and byproducts, targets for waste prevention for specific waste streams, for example food waste, and reporting performance at national and EU level, and also I think on textiles. Targets for reuse, targets for repair, targets to reduce contamination levels, an enhanced role for the National Waste Prevention Programme as Ireland's Circular Economy Programme, perhaps with a specific remit for educational programmes targeting schools. I think that would be really useful too. The idea of circular economy charters or pledges, I know the Commission has indicated that this is an area that they want to focus on, to examine the so-called green credentials of organisations that are advertising themselves as such. But I think this is something that we could look at to encourage, for example, retailers to take a fast fashion pledge, or food outlets to take a food waste pledge. Similarly around water consumption and the more cross-government aspects of circular economy. A new waste strategy also then is a driver for replacing the existing regional waste management plans, and I think those waste management plans should become regional circular economy plans. So I think that's something that we're likely to see as well. So the focus is broadened beyond, again, that traditional approach of what do we do with the stuff that we want to throw away, to how do we extract maximum value at every stage in the product life cycle. So that's my kind of my background and what I'm bringing hopefully to today's discussions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Philip. That's great. Lots of food for thought there, I think, for everyone. We are going to be recording this as well, so if you're not catching everything or you're not able to take notes as quickly as people are talking, we will share the recording with people and hopefully share the slides as well. So we're now going to hand over to Ledea Godina-Koshir. Ledea is the founder and executive director of Circular Change, and she's the current president of the EU Circular Economy Platform. So Ledea and I first met through the European Commission's Social Innovation Competition, and I think that's where we realised how closely our circular economy ambitions are aligned. But today we've asked her to, again, describe her role in the circular economy, both in her home country of Slovenia and also in the EU, and to share with us her overarching thoughts on the circular economy action plan. So over to you, Ledea.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, for this nice introduction, and congratulations to both speakers, because it was so insightful what we have heard from Philip and before from Laura. So thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm coming from Slovenia right now, the only country with love its name, and the country of just the right size, because when we are coming from countries like Ireland or Slovenia, we are 2 million people all together. And I think that now it can be also seen as something what gives us additional opportunity really to recover in this, let's say, green way, and really to bring solutions that are sustainable, because it's much easier in countries like that than in big countries with a huge population. This is at least my opinion. So what I will try to do is to give you an overview of the reaction to the Circular Economy Action Plan through the lenses of European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform that I'm chairing now for the second mandate, and where we are together with Killian. And the second part, we'll focus more on Slovenia and the region as such, because just yesterday there was an important meeting focused on Western Balkans, and these are our neighboring countries, and it is of crucial importance, I believe, how we collaborate now not to leave anyone behind, also in relation to the Circular Economy Action Plan and the whole Green Deal. So first to Brussels and to our stakeholder platform, I would like to stress that this platform is a kind of, I can call it an experiment, because it was established by the European Commission on one side and Economic, Social and Economic Committee on the other. So, and our role is really to bridge top-down and bottom-up approach, and we are trying to be a network of networks. So here I'm inviting really everyone to check what the platform is offering, how different insights, good practices, events, whatever can be published and contributed, and it is really a platform for exchange. So now to the Circular Economy Action Plan, we were very happy when it was introduced, of course, and as it was mentioned before, it was not the first action plan. And as the founder of Circular Change here in Slovenia, I must say that I'm very grateful to Janez Potočnik, former commissioner, who actually put it, the first action plan on the agenda in Brussels, and we are collaborating on that from that time, so 2015. And I see, maybe this is interesting now, where I see this shift, what is different now, and where I see this optimism in a way. So the first one is that previously, and still in some environments, circular economy is very much related to waste management. But now we have realized it's much more than that. And even the action plan is bringing this perspective, as it was mentioned, and focusing much more on the prevention. So it is not only about how to deal with the waste, but how to prevent waste, and really to understand what the resources are and how to maintain the value of these resources for as long as possible. So this is what I see as an important shift. And the other thing that we have noticed already last year, when the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform Conference has been organized, was that circular economy is not now anymore detached from all the climate actions from SDGs, that it is becoming clear that we are sharing the same message, so that the circular economy can be understood as a tool for this transition towards a more sustainable society, economy. So this is important because it is not something what you just add at a certain moment, but this is in the core of the whole transition. And I think it's a very positive signal. The other thing what we liked is this shift from, again, from recycling to design. So how important it is when we think of the products or consumer goods or even services, how to design them in a way that they can maintain value for as long as possible. So if they're not designed in a proper way, then we cannot repair, reuse, refurbish, and so on. So, and it goes directly to the categories that have been introduced before, whether it is a car or a mobile phone or whatever. If you have this in mind, how really to design, how to approach, then it makes a huge difference. And then this repair and refurbish can be implemented. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. So this is important. What I personally liked about this new action plan is the social component, that it is very much focused on people. So that circular economy, again, is not something what is detached from the society, but should be embedded, because we are those who are creating also the economy. So, and now I cannot avoid this to mention COVID-19 and this Corona crisis, because when the action plan has been introduced, it was just before the pandemic moment, to say so. And when you read it now with these lenses of what we have experienced in the last 2 months, you can read it as a kind of a cookbook with very good recipes how to do this recovery. And not as something what we should, you know, wait the right moment to start working on that. The right moment has come. So I would really emphasize that and say, take the document, because it's written in a very nice manner, I would say, and that the presentation that Laura got is really great. And to take it as something what is inspiring you, whoever you are, whether you're an SME, whether you are, I don't know, working in the government, or if you're a farmer. So there are a lot of very, very good guidelines for how to redesign your business or your activities in this circular way. So, and back to jobs, it was mentioned before, and I would like to stress a lot of people are losing jobs nowadays. So it is again the question, okay, how to give work to these people? And we want these green jobs and green work and sustainable work. So again, to be creative, innovative, to take a look at, okay, let's focus now more, maybe someone who's been working from Slovenia perspective, for example, in car industry. We know that it suffered a lot now. So maybe this very person can focus more on repairing because he has skills or she has these skills and so on. So again, let's take a look and let's see where the work can be assured, where new jobs can appear, because before it was more like that, okay, let's think about it in the future, but we are now here. So the green jobs and everything. And related to that, knowledge and education, what we are facing again, our kids are at home. So to rethink the whole education system, the moment has come now. So what are the values that are really essential? What are the skills? Now having a child at home, we can really show by our example how we live in our households in a sustainable, circular way. So this is the best moment to teach kids not to, I don't know, throw food away, how to repair the bicycle, how to maintain clothes for a longer time, because you cannot just go to the shop and buy new one. So it is an important moment from this perspective as well. And then, of course, to bring it on a bigger scale and to think about the whole school system, education system. The fourth thing from the action plan is related to the stakeholders engagement. So now again, from the perspective of our stakeholder platform in Brussels, I see this important role that these things and these documents, action plans, are not written just because of the fact that we need the document. They're written because we have to implement them, and because those on the ground are the implementers of the documents. And here again, the role of the platform is exactly that, to introduce that, to encourage people to read it, to think about it, to discuss, to co-create. So Action Plan is offering this opportunity, and I'm very much in favor of this kind of collaboration and engagement of different stakeholders. And that is what we are working on the city level, local level, governmental level. And leadership as the fifth thing that I would like to focus on. So the leadership is not something, I always say, what you have written on your business card. And nowadays we have realized where the true leaders are. So the leaders are those that people are willing to follow, because there is trust, there is something what you can identify with, there is this empathy, the sense of community, and this is what makes leaders of today and of tomorrow. And by connecting these leaders, whether they're in, I don't know, in a local community or on the city level or on the European level or elsewhere, I believe in this power of new leadership that is really from the people and for the people. And here we can rely again on as well Green Deal as on this action plan. So one thing that was mentioned before, and it was about consumption and production. We have SDGs, and SDG 12 is so nice because it is saying exactly that, sustainable production and consumption. Now we are producing less and consuming less on a global level. So don't forget that this is what we wanted and this is what we committed to. So this recovery should not go, from our perspective, in the direction produce more and consume more, but do it in a more sustainable way, in a way that we will preserve our resources and that the society as such can thrive. So this is in a nutshell how we discussed it, and in the coordination group of the European platform, we also published our joint opinion on Circular Economy Action Plan. I can send you a link and you can see what were our points on which we pointed out and which we stressed. This is exactly what we want to do, to nourish this dialogue and to see how different stakeholders understand and do it. And now a little bit to Slovenia and to the region, as I mentioned before. So I was among the authors of the Circular Economy Action Plan for Slovenia. We published it in 2017. And it was a nice process. And I always say that also these things, like when you're creating and co-creating the roadmaps, this is not about delivering the document. It is the process, so the engagement of the stakeholders and what comes afterwards, the implementation as such. So at that point, we introduced Circular Triangle, pointing out circular economy as something what is a model, circular change, what is something what really addresses all parts of the system. So the change can only happen if all parts are working together. And the third pillar or the third angle is circular culture. And I strongly believe in that now, again, by questioning ourselves, what are the key values and what is our common language, ambition, where do we want to go? And it is different in different environments. So it is not the same, because we were taking as a leading example, the Netherlands and Finland, and culture is different in every country and in your country as well. So think about that, what is that, what resonates in the environment, what people really care about, and then build around that. And now we are working, we are just launching now the Circular Economy Roadmap for Serbia. And at this very moment, we are working with Montenegro, what is a special experiment again, because we cannot meet and the stakeholders cannot sit around the table and brainstorm. So we are working on that in a different way. And I would encourage really everyone now, and it was also a part of the recommendations in the Circular Economy Action Plan, to think about it, how to do this on a city level or on local level or on the national level. So these roadmaps really help to map the stakeholders and to agree on the joint agenda. So maybe this for the beginning, and I'm looking forward for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadea. So we're going to hand over now to Cillian Lohan. So Cillian is often described, at least within the Irish Environmental Network, as our man in Europe, but Cillian is a member of the European Economic and Social Committee, and he's also CEO of the Green Economy Foundation. So Cillian, if you could please also describe your role in the circular economy and your thoughts on the Circular Economy Action Plan for us, please, we'd be very grateful. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks a million, Sarah, and thanks to all the previous speakers. It's great to be part of a conversation in Ireland on the topic of circular economy, because my focus the last few years, as you mentioned, Sarah, has been in Brussels and on a European scale, working a lot with Nadea and with lots of other stakeholders across Europe and beyond, actually. So my initial work in this area is through the European Economic and Social Committee. And a brief word on that, that's a European institution whose function is to be a consultative body for the European Commission, for the European Parliament, and for the European Council. And so that means, in practice, that every time the European Commission launches a new bit of legislation or a new action plan such as this, it's obliged through the treaties on the foundation of the EU to send that piece of work through our committee, and we get to input into it as the voice of civil society. So me coming from the environmental NGO sector, I work with a body of 350 different people, some from the business sector, some from various specific industries, some from consumer groups, farmers, trade unions, and so on. So as many different stakeholder groups represented as possible, and somehow through the 350 of us, we need to come to an agreement on a joint position on these different things. So I have led our work in the last 5 years now on circular economy, where I rapporteured our first institutional response to the first action plan that Laura mentioned, launched back in 2015. And in that response, I suggested that we establish the stakeholder platform that is now been up and running for a number of years, that Nadea, previous speaker, is the chair of for the last number of years. And that's proved a really useful space to bring together all of the different players and connect people who are working in real life on the ground with circular economy, either trying to be innovative and start new businesses or trying to transition their functioning at the moment, or indeed research bodies who are looking at what area do we need to focus on, and connecting all of those people with those who are writing the policies that can be sometimes theoretical or can sometimes inadvertently provide a barrier to what we're all trying to work towards and achieve. So and at the moment I'm currently rapporteuring with a colleague our institutional response to this new action plan as it goes through that process of consultation with the other EU institutions. So it puts me in a good position to understand the proposals, and also in a privileged position to be able to feed back directly to those in the Commission who are writing it. And one final comment on kind of my role in all of this, I also was able to commission a study on existing roadmaps. So last year we looked at different areas and regions who had developed their own roadmap to a circular economy. And that's a very interesting resource. It's available on the EESC website, but also on the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform website, where we've looked at how different regions who have different priorities and different focus areas, how they interpret circular economy and how they develop their own strategy that's specific to their region or their specific sectoral interests. So given all of that context, I would say that I was very pleased with the publication of the new action plan, as we've discussed so far this morning. And in particular, I think the shift has been away from waste, which is a very necessary first step, and I think was a very necessary first step with the first action plan, that we needed to focus on the waste that our system was producing and how we were going to deal with it in the best possible manner. But this next step after that focus naturally leads further up the chain of where that waste is coming from and all of the levels along the supply chain. And this new action plan makes a real attempt to do that by going right back to eco-design and right back to how we design products, and the idea of having things that are repairable, having things that you know the lifespan of them, having products that are able to be disassembled and then their component parts used as a secondary raw material. I think these elements were missing from the first action plan and are now included, at least as an ambition, in the second one. So that gives us a huge platform of where to go next. And my overarching impression is that, okay, this isn't a binding legislative document. However, it does set a very clear message to all stakeholders, to national governments, but also to the business sector and to us as consumers or different stakeholder groups, that this is the direction that we're going in. This is the commitment from the Commission, that these are where the incentives are going to be. And what it gives us an opportunity to do is to give ourselves a competitive advantage as we design this new sustainable economy. And I like very much, as Lede has mentioned, the fact that it puts people back in the conversation. Very often when we talk about climate, when we talk about general sustainability issues, we talk about it as a cost to people and as an inconvenience to people. Philip mentioned it in the consultation group, that there's this reaction when you're putting the onus on people to change their behavior, as Ledea called it, a cultural kind of change that's required. And that makes things difficult. That makes people question, well, what is the circular economy? And now I see us with a huge opportunity to communicate that very effectively, to communicate it in an Irish context. Well, what does this mean for us? And it raises the question as to who we see as the drivers for the change. And for me, the critical issue with policy is to incentivize businesses in order to make life easier for the consumer or for the end user, so that we create, with the circular economy system, a model that means choosing the circular option is not a difficult choice to make. It's not a more expensive choice to make. It's not something that's for the privileged, middle class, well-off people to be choosing their organic products or their sustainable products, but that actually that we communicate this as something that makes the sustainable option available to everybody, because that's the goal in terms of sustainable development, and that's what we need to achieve in order to get buy-in and put people at the heart of the transition. And I believe that the action plan gives us a great bedrock to justify creating a system that delivers on that. In terms of the specific different content, I think it's very interesting for us to talk about food production in an Irish context in this, because one of the things I see missing from the action plan is that there's too much of a focus on material flows. Of course, it's important, but sometimes we forget that the circular economy is not just one big circle, but actually a series of lots of different circles. And probably the biggest two of those are, yes, the material flows that we talk about, but there's also the biological flows and the natural biological systems. And they come into play very much when we're talking about the two circles interacting if we're creating bioproducts, but also when we're talking about farming, food production, land management. There we have to look at the implementing the circular economy in terms of biological circles and how we best take advantage of that. Overall, I would say that it's this huge opportunity to go back to a reduction of waste or a zero waste society that actually we had in previous generations. The difference being that in previous generations we had zero waste from a place of scarcity and a place of where we were lacking or a place of poverty, whereas now there's an opportunity to have zero waste from a place of abundance, actually to use the zero waste model as a means of increasing prosperity and well-being for everybody. So I think the framework that we now have gives us a great opportunity to move forward, and I'm really excited about the opportunity that Ireland has to get this right from the start, because it's in fairness, I think we've taken the first steps, which is looking at the waste side of it, and now we're poised to have something very comprehensive that's in line with the rest of Europe in order to deliver a competitive advantage to Ireland and deliver improved well-being and prosperity for citizens by becoming a leader in this particular space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Killian. And that gives us quite a bit of time, which is great. We are going to aim to finish up at probably about 25 past 12 with our questions and answers from the floor. And we're going to hand over to Laura just to do a quick sum up, and to Mary Frances to summarise the entire webinar. So now what I would like you to do, just to repeat, if you do have a question for any of our speakers, if you could just notify us through the group chat or raise your hand, we can unmute your mic. And I know we have a few questions also from the live stream on YouTube, so I'm going to be going across to my colleague Ed Coleman for some questions from there. But maybe to start off, I might just ask all of our expert speakers there to give me an example of maybe two actions that you feel are immediately actionable, either within a national or European context. And then maybe if you could also share maybe two actions that you feel are really going to be a struggle in terms of implementing the Circular Economy Action Plan. And I might start, Killian, with you on that one.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. Okay, well, I would say the most critical thing, and the thing that we can do immediately, is in the space of upskilling and training. I've come in kind of doing the circuit of conferences and interactions across Europe. We now see a trend in the last couple of years where in lots of businesses in particular, there's suddenly somebody appointed as the circular economy manager or somebody who's in charge of the circular economy. And very often it's lumped on top of their already existing job that they have. It's not a new position that's created. I think somebody knocks on the door and says, you are now circular economy as well, look it up and do a bit of that. I know the same happens across all of Europe with people who are responsible for procurement, where they're told, okay, do a bit of circularity and add on to it. And so I think there's a huge gap there. There's also a lot of people who are trying to be innovative or entrepreneurial ideas that are coming forward, where individuals or community groups or social enterprises want to be involved in this idea of sustainability, of using secondary raw materials, and yet they're struggling to sometimes find a space to operate within. As I've traveled, the Rediscovery Centre has been mentioned a number of times in different conferences as a great example of an organization who's working in this area. So I think there's a great chance to amplify that up as a first step to do. I see some of the questions coming in about in the chat about different interpretations of what is circular economy. Doesn't mean we continue consuming at the same level, but we just have everything is recyclable, which I would say very clearly, no, that's not what it's about. And indeed, I would say that the circular economy is not a recycling economy, and that by measuring recycling levels, that doesn't give you a circular economy. It's the reuse, the reduction of waste, are much more important elements of it. So these detailed discussions and this detailed shared understanding of what we mean by circular economy is really important before we start getting ahead of ourselves, and before we start misinterpreting it to the point where we drive people away from it. And I think that's happened with sustainability in general. The word sustainability or sustainable development, in my mind, has lost its battle over the last 20 or 30 years, because sustainable is thrown in front of everything now, and it doesn't necessarily mean what we originally meant by the concept of sustainable development. Circular economy has an opportunity now to in the first instance, ensure that we understand correctly what's meant by it, and that we have a robust monitoring mechanism and verification system for what's claiming to be circular. And that's actually contained within the action plan, a desire to ensure that there's no greenwashing by industry on this. So linking up with that slide that Laura presented on skills agenda, the action plan for the social economy, the pact for skills, there are all these instruments there that I think we can use in Ireland to have an upskilling and training for workers, people who can have job opportunities in this space, for entrepreneurs who want to be innovative. Our levels of innovation are reasonably low compared to other countries in Europe in this, and yet I think we have the people and the skills and the ideas, but we need to help them get to the starting off point. And I think for public procurers as well, which is identified as a key area, there needs to be shared training and learning there, so people know what is circular and how to take advantage of the opportunities. And I would also say, let's not forget groups like lending bodies, the banks or the credit unions, so that they're aware of what circularity is and what these new business models that people may be coming in with entrepreneurial ideas to them, saying we want to work in this space. Let's make the lending bodies aware that this is a space that is going to be a huge integral part of how our economy functions in the future. So I would say, I've spoken a bit long there on one point. So to give you a second one briefly, I think integrating circular economy with climate action is going to be essential, and it's not circular if it's driven by fossil fuels. In a very simple sense, a fossil fuel source of energy is a linear source of energy, so we need to ensure the energy inputs are also circular, and that links it very clearly to climate action. The longer term problems or the things that will take longer, I think there's a mention of certifying carbon sequestration. I think this is going to be such an important area to get right. the Commission have kicked it down the road a little bit with the action plan and saying that we'll look at it in 2023. There's a very important debate to be had on that particular issue, and I think we should start it early in Ireland. It's linked to land management, because if we're looking at sequestration rates on different types of land, then those landowners and the land management needs to be a critical part of that conversation. And that links me to the other longer term issue, or more difficult issue, which is the farm to fork strategy, or agriculture and food production in Ireland, and how we get that sector to buy into the circular economy, and how we get to design our food systems in order to ensure they are circular. In the Irish management system, we have a very good opportunity to have a competitive advantage in that area. You know, if you just get an aerial view over Ireland, okay, we've problems. Our environmental problems are well communicated and well known in terms of rivers and problems with nitrates and biodiversity loss and everything else. But unlike a lot of other countries in Europe, we still have a very strong physical environmental infrastructure, you know, in terms of hedgerows, in terms of our built environment, and the amount of countryside that we have, the opportunity to recover the damage that has been done, and to use to increase the value of our land as in terms of food production, but also in terms of looking at that carbon sequestration, is a huge opportunity. And they're the longer term issues, and they're very challenging to get into. But the sooner we start that conversation with the relevant people, I think actually it could be a huge opportunity and give us a big competitive advantage in the European context.
Okay, Philip?
Thanks. Yeah, there are lots of things that we can do in the short term. So I think we need in Ireland to make a fairly clear and unambiguous policy statement that we are fully committed to transitioning to a circular economy. That, I think, is number one. I think we can also ensure that the public sector leads by example, and through things like green public procurement, for example, there. So that very clear policy direction and leadership from the public sector, I think, is something that we can do very clearly. Looking specifically at waste, we can ensure that the new waste strategy is a very strong, again, signal of intent of just how important circular economy considerations are to all public policy areas. And we can set specific targets, as I mentioned earlier on, that go beyond what we would traditionally have looked at in terms of what to do with the stuff that we want to throw away, to how do we ensure products stay in invaluable use for longer. So I think we can change quite significantly the way that we deal with end of waste as a regulatory process and byproducts to ensure that that circularity is embedded. I think we can also take steps to ensure that circularity is embedded into economic recovery measures and to highlight opportunities for decoupling economic recovery from waste generation. So again, a lot of people so far, I think we've all touched on COVID-19 as an opportunity for us to kind of rethink and to reset the clock in terms of some of our behaviors. Killian mentioned the need to ensure that people are aware of the difficulties that the word sustainability has gone through over the last 20 or 30 years, and I agree with you completely. I've maybe been responsible once or twice for careless use of the word sustainable or sustainability, and it has become a kind of a debased phrase at this point. So we need to make sure that the same doesn't happen with circular economy. Part of that is, I think, about translating the concept of circular economy into practical steps for everybody. So if you were to ask anybody in the street, are you in favor of a transition to a circular economy? They'll probably all say yes, because they may not fully understand what it is. There's more of a challenge once you start to break it down and say, okay, well, a transition to a circular economy means changes to the way you work, changes to the way you consume, changes to what you eat, changes to where you source your food from, changes to how you power your home or how you power your business. So the conversation can become more challenging, but potentially more rewarding. And Mary Frances mentioned earlier on the research from the business community a number of years ago, which show fairly starkly that even people in senior leadership roles in large enterprises around the country had a fairly poor understanding of what the circular economy means to them. And if they don't understand what it means, then they certainly don't understand what the opportunities are for them. So that to me is a huge challenge.
That's good. Dea?
Okay, yeah, to wrap it up here. So I agree with everything what has been said so far. So one thing I think is really important is this narrative, what was said now. So not to think about what we have to fight against or what we have to sacrifice, but really that the whole story is around the quality of life. How to maintain at least the quality of life, because in this part of the world we have high quality of life. And so the circular economy is a tool in a way how to maintain it. And once you understand it, and if we go back to Greeks and what they thought with the word economy, oikos. So it was around home, how to maintain your home. And this is the first step, the short term, as I mentioned before. So how we can maintain our household in a more circular, sustainable way and maintain the quality of life we have. So this is essential, I guess, because from here on, then you can get people on board. Otherwise, there is always, oh, I don't want, yeah, change is nice, but not me. So this is the first thing. And we can really practice it now. The second one is what I like, what Kilian mentioned about Ireland, and it is similar in Slovenia. We are one of the greenest destinations as well. And we are lucky that we have a lot of forests, preserved forests, drinking water, and so on. So this is really an asset. And I believe that nowadays we realized how important that is and how valuable that is, so that we became even more green in our hearts as citizens, as the inhabitants of these countries. So this is a very important capital, and let's build on this capital. Back to the industries and so on, one important thing is also tourism, for example. And now for Slovenia particularly, and I guess for you as well and other countries. And here we cannot think about the recovery of the tourism if we do not think about this green tourism or sustainable or circular one. So there are a lot of opportunities again and threats as well, because in a circular economy action plan, for example, when we are addressing single-use plastic, packaging, everything. So if we want now to bring the standards that everything should be single-use plastic, that everything should be hermetically closed and so on, then we have a trouble. So therefore, I think it's important now to think, okay, things are not the same, whatever, let's take tourism now, but what counts? So how, and here I'm coming back to these local communities and to the trust. So if we are able now to organize life in our communities so that it is built on trust and transparency and maintains the quality of life, then we as citizens will feel good. And once you have this kind of community, even the tourist will come because he will trust that the food is okay, that the water is okay, that the accommodation is okay. And then you don't need the other extreme of this, everything is packed, everything is sterilized, and you cannot. So this is something what I would put as an example of that, how to think about this recovery in a green way. And this should be very, different stakeholders should sit together and different approaches should come together to co-create these solutions. So that would be for short term, I would say, let's talk about how. Because yes, circular economy, yes, but how to implement that. And whenever I got these webinars now and different kind of exchange of knowledge and everything, and whenever we discuss with whoever from this business or another, we always find something what is an opportunity. And people then start thinking, oh, nothing is lost. Yes, I can survive and my business can thrive. And value chains are something what we shall address as well, to think who are the partners in our value chains, how we can reorganize these value chains and make the whole business more circular through the new partnerships or existing to redefine them. So to go to the midterm or long term, absolutely systemic approach is needed. Because now we have realized with this COVID how health system and climate are connected. And it is what is discussed really. I see it that it is on the top of the agenda. So it is not that we will be more healthy if we do not take in account the whole climate issue. So it goes together and everything else as well. So this systemic approach, this global approach, this is needed if we want really to make change for a positive transition. So this, and the second, I will go back to what I mentioned before and what has been said. So this kind of roadmaps, action plans, really to have concrete guidelines how to navigate in the direction of circular transition. And it can be on different levels. And right now we are working also with Chile, for example, and Latin America is waking up. So this sharing of experiences from perspective of Europe, we want to be here a kind of lighthouse of this green recovery and Green Deal and the circular economy approach. So now we really have the opportunity to show what it means and to collaborate with others to make it happen on different parts of the world on the long term. So.
Thank you, Ladea. Okay, so we have a few questions. I'm afraid this is going to be a bit of a quick fire round. So if I could ask you to please keep the questions brief, just introduce yourself, let us know who the question is for. And as soon as you raise your hand, we'll unmute you. We're going to go first to Claire Downey. Claire is from Community Reuse Network. Then hopefully I think we're going to go over to Jude, and then we're going to check in with Ed just to go through a few quick questions on the live stream. So Claire.
Thank you very much. Great. Thanks everyone for really excellent presentations and discussions so far this morning. It's actually been very inspiring. I had a question that picks up on a couple of speakers' comments about cross-cutting actions and how we integrate circular economy with climate action. Obviously, it's quite challenging to reflect progress on circular economy at a national level because a lot of national greenhouse gas reporting wouldn't pick up on goods that are imported and the impact of those goods. So our efforts to prevent or recirculate those goods isn't really shown in our greenhouse gas reporting, with the exception of food, of course. So I just wanted to ask, I guess, to the panel how you think we can improve that connection, and maybe is this material footprint idea something that can be developed even at national level. I also just wanted to pick up quickly on what Cillian was talking about in terms of jobs and skills, that there is a good opportunity in Ireland at the moment as we're developing transition roadmaps. I think the NESC, I've forgotten what that stands for, sorry, is focusing on transition roadmaps, and I think a lot of it is based on this idea of energy transition, but it would be really good to see circular opportunities built into that as well. Thanks.
Okay. And could I ask maybe one of our guest speakers to take that question, because we will run out of time and we want to get through a few questions. So Ladea, Cillian or Philip, does anyone want to volunteer?
I'm happy to take it. Claire, great question. I focused mainly on the first part actually, and maybe somebody might want to take the second part, but in terms of measurement and the impact of consumption, production and waste in terms of climate action, you're right, it's difficult to ensure that the full picture is captured. We in the circular economy waste side, we're very keen to ensure that circular economy and waste were covered in the climate action plan last year, recognizing the difficulty of ensuring adequate data capture. In terms of developing footprints for different product streams, yeah, I can certainly see the value in it. Difficult to do, and if we were to do it, we would probably, we'd need to sort of start with one and build from there. I think food waste is food is the obvious one to start with, so we would certainly be willing to do that. But it's complex and it's not going to be easy. We can't deliver it kind of overnight, but certainly we would be committed to looking to how we can develop it.
We might move on. There's a question here just on the chat for Cillian from Fiona McCool from the Environmental Protection Agency. She just wanted to know what supporting social enterprises how can we support social enterprises? And if you had any quick insights into that, how can social enterprises be supported within the Circular Economy Action Plan? That's that. Killian?
Well, I think there's two perspectives on it. One is understanding what social enterprises are, because I think there's still a little confusion amongst the general public as to what a social enterprise is. And once that's understood, I guess giving our custom or our business or availing of those services locally is one way of supporting it. But in terms of systemic support, I'd go back to talking about finance flows, because I think funding, either privately or public funding streams, need to be designed to support innovative social enterprises. And I think we should be pushing for an indicator to be added on innovation, where currently we just measure patents that are lodged as a measure of how innovative our economy has been. And actually we should be measuring new social enterprises that are successfully funded as a measurement of our innovation. So I think giving the financial supports would be the best thing, and making them clearly available, easily available, not requiring match funding, and making them help using that to stimulate more activity in the area.
We might head over to Ed just to take a few questions from the live stream, if that's okay. Ed, are you able to come in to share some questions with us, please?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. Well done to everybody who's spoken so far. I'm keeping one eye on the Zoom and one eye on the YouTube channel, and there's fantastic conversations going on there. If I could just highlight a couple of questions. This one's maybe for Philip. It's from Donald O'Donoghue. For construction projects, the suggested digital log book of materials would sit very well within a safety file. Is there any precedent or exemplar for this?
All right, yeah. I may as well be on mute anyway, because I don't have the answer to that. So, but I'm happy to take the question away and come back to you. I don't know if there is precedent.
Okay, great. Well, it's good to ask the question, I suppose. I'll move on. Maybe I'll put this one for Ladea. This comes in from McCormick Communications. Is there an open platform or opportunity to bring leaders together, share best practice and ideas, and amplify the message?
Yeah, the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform is open for everyone, and we are really encouraging everyone to contribute. But according to my experiences working with different, let's say, groups or platforms, from Ellen MacArthur Foundation to the PACE from World Economic Forum, Circular Economy Club. So I think there are a lot, we are there. And it is more about connecting the dots, not building another structure, but really what we are doing right now. I believe in that. And then what you can do within your environment through your network is what brings impact. So Circular Economy Platform is welcoming everyone, but on the other hand, really connecting and working on the ground is what makes an impact.
Great, thank you. And maybe just one more question. This one's for Killian, and this one was emailed in from Eileen and Malahide. Are there any circular economy activities that have inspired you and that have the potential to be replicated in Ireland?
Thanks. You know, there are so many, and actually I'll build on what Ladea has just said. The Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, if you go to the website for that, we have a map of Europe, and you can click on the map to search for examples of inspiring projects across, you know, by geography, or there's a drop-down menu where you can search per sector. So whatever your particular area of interest is, whether it's looking at recycled materials being used for clothing or for fabrics, or whether it's something more industrial in the construction sector, I think the answer to the question of whether there's a digital footprint product out there or in use already would quite most likely be on that platform. That it's a huge hub of information. So either using the drop-down menu to search by sector, or using the map gives so many different examples that will, you know, some will be boring to some and some exciting to others, and it allows you to search on there. So it's a huge resource, and I'd encourage everyone to go and have a look at it. And not only can you look at it, but if you have something yourself to contribute, there's a very simple mechanism for putting your own information up there as well.
That's great. Thanks, Killian. And I think we'll take the final question now from Jude, and then we're going to head back to Laura for a very quick update just on the actions, and we'll ask Mary Frances to close the seminar. So over to you, Jude.
Hi everyone. I'm Jude. I just had a quick question to Philip about the Circular Economy Action Plan. So Ireland's currently just had a public consultation on its waste strategy. So I was just wondering whether Ireland's going to have a public consultation on a wider, broader circular economy action plan.
Thanks for the question, Jude. Yes, the intention would be that we would have a full public consultation. We have been very keen, as I was saying earlier on, to ensure that we have proper, really meaningful stakeholder engagement on developing the waste strategy. And it would be our intention that we would continue that into the development of a whole of government circular economy strategy later in the year. We have the benefit of having the OECD assist us in a kind of an appraisal of how circular economy is being translated into public policy action in Ireland at the minute. So we should have the benefits of that to inform our whole of government strategy later in the year. But yes, fully committed to public consultation and stakeholder engagement.
Great, thank you very much, Philip. We're going to go over to Laura now, just to say to people that there is an opportunity to continue to ask questions, so please do send them through to cemovement@rediscoverycentre.ie, which was on the link to your email for this call. And we will have an ongoing conversation on the circular economy, so please do use that function, and we will endeavour to answer all of the questions on the chat and to follow up with some further information to this call. So Laura, over to you.
Yes, and I'm going to keep it very short, as I've been told we're running out of time. So just to summarize the actions that our speakers can see in the short term that are more easily achievable maybe, and Cillian there mentioned the need to upskill and train people in relation to the Circular Economy Action Plan. There was the talk of the skills agenda and the plans for ensuring there's the skills in the economy for people to actually use the circular transition for themselves. Cillian also mentioned the easily achievable task of integrating the circular economy with climate action. So ensuring that our energy systems are circular, that we phase out fossil fuels, but I assume also related to the Circular Economy Action Plan, that we actually measure how the circular economy contributes to that. Philip mentioned a few easily achievable targets, which included the public sector leading by example, ensuring that the public procurement is taken into account for the circular economy, but also for the economic recovery to decouple it from waste generation to have a green recovery. And Philip also pointed out the need to shift the focus from a waste disposal or management paradigm and rhetoric to using the maximum value of items. Ladea mentioned the need to see the circular economy as a tool to maintain a high quality of life, so to actually bring a nice standard of life to people with the circular economy, to view it as an opportunity rather than as a barrier. And also pointed out that we need to have the important industries such as tourism for Slovenia, but also the food industry for Ireland, very much in alignment with the circular economy. The more long-term, maybe more difficult actions to achieve were mentioned with regards the food system there from Cillian. So it is an opportunity, but it is also potentially a barrier. So we need to ensure that the Irish agriculture and food system is in line with the circular economy and is willing to join us on that journey. And Cillian also mentioned that it might be difficult to include or implement this regulatory framework on carbon sequestration, but we should start early because it is a large opportunity for us. Several speakers mentioned the need for a shared understanding of the circular economy, but also for a systemic approach, for people to understand what it means, to come along with it, and to see a direct translation of the broad principles into actions for businesses and individuals and communities.
Mary Frances, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just to start by thanking the speakers and contributors for the last hour or so. It's been really good, and to thank Sarah and Rediscovery Centre for setting up and facilitating today. For me, I took, if I was to take three of the many points that were made, I really heard a lot of positivity towards what the new circular economy action plan can bring for Ireland, both from an environmental perspective, social perspective, and an economic perspective. That really for us to act now is a key point for us. But however, we need to know this can't be done in isolation. There's very much a call for collaboration, co-creation in order to make this a success, and very much then also tied into the green economic recovery, and that out of the current stressful and tough times that we're having, that really the circular economy action plan is in many ways a roadmap that we can start to pick up and run with. And I think in these times that's a very positive thing to have. So just to conclude by thanking everybody for their contributions.
Thank you very much, Mary Frances. And yes, thank you to everyone today. Thank you, Mary Frances. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Philip, Ladea, and Killian. And thank you to all of you for participating in the call. I have unmuted you all, so I'll ask you to show your appreciation to everybody in the traditional manner. Thank you. Thank you very, very much for participating today.
Yeah, well, there is a right, so
Thank you.